Creo que el pendejito de tu hijo hace su pinche cagadero por sus huevos. No, pinche hijo, son imbéciles en el 4. Mucha gente siempre está al dilema de, oye, es que es tu hijo, no, a mí me vale 3 hectáreas de verga. Neta, yo destruí el instituto porque es un puto imbécil, o sea, ¿qué tiempo tienes de conectar?
Despite Fallout New Vegas being my favorite Fallout in the franchise, I always come back to Fallout 4 because of its world, gameplay, and mods. This is also one of my comfort games. I'd say most of the side quests and DLCs are pretty good too, except for a few of them, like the Kid in a Fridge one, for example, that has garnered huge amounts of dislike amongst the community. But in general, I really like roaming around in the wasteland, building up a small, livable settlement, and leveling up my character. One thing I genuinely dislike is the main story. I avoid it most of the time now because playing through it feels like a chore to me. It is also disliked by many, but I'd like to share my opinion as to why. Spoilers for the main story of Fallout 4. The issues, Acts 1 and 2. The first time you play it, I think it is interesting, uncovering the mystery of the Institute, the plot twist of Sean actually being the director of it, and if you so desire, how to deal with the Institute afterwards. It's an interesting ride, in my opinion. Also, the discussion regarding if sins are people or not, and the paranoia of the Commonwealth is neatly set up. In my opinion, well, what's the issue then? Fallout's intro sequences are of average length. New Vegas' introduction is short and well executed, but 3's and 4's are slightly longer in an attempt to submerge us in our characters' world, as well as their backstories, and the way Bethesda introduces the wasteland is pretty nice too. Unfortunately, on repeat playthroughs, you start to notice how long and tedious it can be. From leaving Vault 111 to get into the Institute, you have to go through 10 quests, some longer than others. These 10 missions are the ones that feel more like a chore to me. The pacing is just all over the place, the mystery just drags on for too long, and while I understand it's a way for the players to get familiar with Boston and some of the factions, I prefer to run into them in different ways. For example, you can meet the Railroad and the Brotherhood of Steel by doing other missions that are not necessarily related to the main story. I don't like the way you're essentially obligated to work with Nick when it seems plausible to get similar clues on your own by just exploring the world. Unlikely Valentine and his whole character related quests could have been secondary and it would have been okay. It would have been difficult to get Kellogg's memories decrypted, sure, but it's not hard to run into Good Neighbor, and I'm pretty sure the player is gonna stumble eventually into the memory den and eventually meet Dr. Amari. My other issue with the main story in Acts 1 and 2 of Fallout 4 is that it's hard for us to care about the sole survivor's spouse and kid. The introduction to their world was good, I'm not denying that, but our partner dies so early that by the time you're about to finish Act 2, I doubt you care that much for them. Second is that you never get to actually meet Sean as a person because he was taken from you at a very early age, so when you meet him, he's just controlling, bitter, and a total stranger to the player. Joining the Institute because he's your son seems like not enough of a reason to me. The glowing sea could have been used better and sadly suffers because of how little radiation it gives to the player. Despite having dangerous creatures, it's fairly easy to craft an overpowered build, luck oriented for example, so it won't be as hard in the end. It doesn't even matter that you don't go wearing power armor, something explicitly stated by Dr. Amari. I also think giving power armor to the player so early kills the thrill and meaning of power armor in Fallout. This could have been placed later in the story, I think, but they did a good job at showcasing this massive armor for what it is, a moving tank-like armor that needs maintenance and fuel. And on a personal note, the first two acts became simply uninteresting to me because once you know the mystery and the plot twist, it just loses its charm completely. In my personal opinion, at least. And I also have to admit that maybe my opinion has been tainted because I've played this game a lot of times. Act 3 is when the player's role playing becomes more important, deciding how you're gonna deal with the Commonwealth future based on your beliefs, who and how you choose to help, and the stakes are finally starting to get high. Unfortunately, getting here takes too long and it limits the player's role playing possibilities by a lot. If your character is male, he has military background and is a father. If your character is female, she has a background as a lawyer and a mother. This limits the dialogue options as well, tying you to the desperate parent scenario. Not to mention, it locks you into a heterosexual narrative. Even though you can act according to your character's sexuality, the main story still forces this onto you. You may argue that your character's gender identity and sexual orientation are not important to a story like this one. And you're right, they don't really matter, they shouldn't matter. And that's my issue with this as well. It should matter to your character only, maybe, and the people they choose to relate to. And I think it's better if it doesn't define a huge portion of the story. Even though you can roleplay and build up your character however you want, if you left out this information, I think it still hurts that it's there. What's so brilliant about New Vegas' role-playing scenarios is that the only information forcibly attached to your character was their previous profession, something that, while relevant to the plot, it's not forcefully needed. What drives the courier's narrative is revenge, and the sole survivor is both revenge and finding out what happened to your plastic-looking kid. The Last of Us Part 1 goes far and beyond to make the player care about Sarah, Joel's daughter. Going back to the plot, the first seems easier to relate to a general audience, just revenge, while giving you more freedom to construct your narrative and focus on other storytelling elements. And the last act of most Fallout games revolves around picking a side and dealing with the destiny of the state you're in and making bigger decisions. So I think the issue mostly lies in the first two parts. Fallout 3 solved this by shortening the main quest if you know in which vault your father's in. And as you may remember, the vault is hidden underneath a garage and you have to know which garage it is, and then you can progress with the story. But like I said a moment ago, it can be shortened if you have this information, and it makes the main story feel less like a chore. If you wanna go and do those missions, you totally can, or if you don't, you can skip them as well. In 4, even though you eventually learn how to get into the institute and where it is, you still have to go around in circles. While I have my personal issue with the factions, I don't really like any of them 100%, I think that's good. Not everything is black and white, although here they try to make it seem that way, portraying the Minutemen as the quote-unquote clear good and the Institute as the quote-unquote clear bad in the narrative for most of the story. The railroad is small and only focused on the synth liberation while staying away from the Commonwealth's fate. The Minutemen are good, but they try to cover as much ground as they can, and it's a faction you have to build from the ground up, not to mention the main character is their undisputed leader, and I don't think just having one supreme leader is a fine idea. A board of directors, for example, could be a better thing, I don't know. The Brotherhood of Steel, while well organized and equipped, its highly militaristic focus, segregated views, and forcefully colonizing Boston are not that great either. Lastly, the Institute doesn't have a vision for the world. They have segregated views and they go beyond to act as slavers and kidnappers, seeing the above as playgrounds is not ideal either. Sean electing the sole survivor as a leader based on the fact that they are related feels odd to me. He doesn't even know us and he ignores the board of directors when they oppose this decision, making the Institute an autocratic organization at the end either way. Even if you pick them apart, they went a great mile to make sure you see the Minutemen as the clear good, and while other titles have also morally better factions, I guess I just like the approach New Vegas takes with more ambiguous factions. But most games are like that, right? Or suffer from similar problems. Well, I think linear narrative ones are, some of them even provide decisions, but proper open world decision based RPGs should not be limited by elements like this. Cyberpunk 2077 is divided by acts as well, and while the first act revolves around a heist, it serves as a good narrative bridge between the acts. It's not that long and it doesn't limit the player that much. See other RPGs and Fallout titles to spot the differences. Don't get me wrong, I still love this game, and even with a little over 1000 hours, I still managed to enjoy it. Thanks to the modding community and gameplay, the DLCs help out too. I think it's important to analyze the things we like through a more critical eye. It doesn't mean it's gonna make us dislike it or anything, but it does help us value the more well done elements. One criticism I have for myself is that I should learn to separate New Vegas from other video game titles and try to see the good elements rather than focusing on comparisons. It's so much better when you just enjoy something you enjoy rather than turning better towards it because something else is better, especially in entertainment. Thank you so much for watching. Go play Fallout 4 and form your own opinion. Like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more content like this. You can support me on Patreon if you want to, and have a nice day.